Why honesty quietly erodes authority before it builds trust. You were taught that honesty creates closeness. You were taught that transparency earns respect. You were taught that explaining yourself is moral. Those teachings weakened you. Honesty does not exist in a vacuum. It operates inside hierarchies, inside dominant structures, inside unspoken power arrangements that decide who is allowed to speak freely and who is punished for doing so. When you reveal yourself too clearly, too early, or too completely, you collapse distance. Distance is not cruelty. Distance is altitude. Authority requires height. Height requires separation. You feel the loss before you understand it. Conversations shorten. Responses cool. Eye contact shifts. The room subtly reorganizes against you. Nothing overt happens. That is the most dangerous part. Power rarely announces its withdrawal. You spoke honestly. They did not move closer. They moved back. Because honesty is interpreted as exposure. Exposure is interpreted as availability. Availability is interpreted as weakness when no status has been established. You assumed truth was neutral. It is not. Truth is leverage sensitive. In low-status hands, it becomes a confession. In high-status hands, it becomes a verdict. Every time you clarified your intentions, you surrendered mystery. Every time you explained your motives, you dissolved authority. Every time you rushed to be understood, you taught others that your position was negotiable. You did not lose respect because you were wrong. You lost it because you were readable. Power does not reward sincerity. It rewards control of access, control of timing, control of self-disclosure. Honesty without hierarchy is a signal of submission. This is where the shame begins. Not emotional shame, structural shame. The recognition that you volunteered information that was never requested, that you reduced yourself to be digestible, that you offered clarity to people who had not earned it. You believed being open would make you trusted. Instead, it made you predictable. Predictability invites handling. Handling invites disregard. Notice the pattern. The more honest you become, the less carefully you are treated. The more transparent you act, the more casually others respond. This is not coincidence. This is design. Honesty collapses distance. Distance sustains power. You were never rejected for being truthful. You were repositioned, lower. And once power leaks, it does not rush back. You were conditioned to believe the system was fair, that if you behaved correctly, reality would respond correctly. That honesty would be met with honesty. That openness would be returned with openness. That belief was implanted to keep hierarchies stable. Fairness is not a law. It is a story told to those without leverage. Respect is not generated by virtue. It is allocated by position. Validation is not owed. It is extracted through dominance or withheld through indifference. You mistake social life for a moral exchange. It is not. It is a power economy. In this economy, explanation is payment. Reaction is payment. Emotional display is payment. When you offer these freely, you signal that you cannot enforce boundaries without consent. You assume people respond to truth. They respond to pressure, scarcity, and perceived cost of access. Honesty does not create obligation. Authority does. The illusion collapses here. No one is required to honor your sincerity. No one is compelled to treat your openness as sacred. When you expose yourself without demand, the system reclassifies you, not as trustworthy, as manageable. You believed honesty created mutuality. Mutuality only exists between equals. When status is uneven, honesty flows downward and control flows upward. You feel this when your words are acknowledged but not weighted, when your disclosures are heard but not respected, when your openness is remembered but not reciprocated. This is not misunderstanding. It is accurate interpretation. The system heard you correctly. It simply decided you were safe to deprioritize. Belief in fairness makes you overextend. Overextension reveals hunger. Hunger lowers rank. Rank determines how your honesty is received. Truth spoken from below sounds like justification. Truth spoken from above sounds like judgment. You were never participating in a shared exchange. You were auditioning without realizing it. And the moment you began explaining yourself, the audition ended. Because power never explains itself. It defines. It withholds. It lets others adjust around it. Once you accept that respect is positional, not moral, the illusion dissolves. You stop expecting reactions. You stop seeking alignment. You stop assuming transparency is safe. You see the system as it is, cold, hierarchical, unconcerned with fairness. And from that recognition, something hardens. Not resentment, clarity. The game does not reward honesty. It rewards leverage. Attention is not free. It is the most expensive currency in any hierarchy. When you explain yourself, you purchase attention with submission. When you clarify your feelings, you signal that their interpretation matters more than your position. When you react, you confirm that they can move you. Reaction is proof of vulnerability. Explanation is proof of dependence. You are trained to believe communication resolves tension. In power systems, communication reveals leverage points. The one who speaks more exposes more surface area. The one who listens controls the frame. Every unsolicited explanation is an admission that your stance is unstable. Every emotional clarification invites correction. Every attempt to be understood teaches others that they are the judge and you are the applicant. This is why restraint unnerves people. It denies them currency. It denies them access to your internal state. It denies them the reassurance that they matter enough to provoke movement. Withholding is not silence for its own sake. It is dominance through non-participation. When you do not react, the system recalibrates. Others begin to overanalyze. They fill the vacuum with projections. They offer more than you ever did. You think attention is something you give to be liked. In reality, attention is something others must earn to remain relevant to you. Power does not chase comprehension. It assumes position and lets misunderstanding exist. Confusion beneath you is not a threat. It is confirmation. The moment you stop explaining, dynamics shift. People lean forward. They replay conversations. They question their standing. Not because you demanded it, but because you removed yourself as a stabilizing reference. Submission seeks resolution. Authority tolerates ambiguity. You were reacting to be fair. You were explaining to be decent. You were clarifying to avoid conflict. Each time, you paid with status. Attention flows upward. Reaction flows downward. The one who withholds explanation forces others to negotiate internally. The one who reacts instantly advertises sensitivity. Sensitivity invites management. You do not need to dominate. You only need to stop paying. Silence is not absence. It is pressure without effort. It is gravity. It bends the room without movement. Once you understand attention as currency, you stop spending it carelessly. You stop reacting to provocation. You stop clarifying your intent. You stop offering emotional receipts. You let others sit with uncertainty. And uncertainty does not weaken power. It concentrates it. Silence is misinterpreted as emptiness by those who need noise to feel real. In power systems, silence is density. When you do not respond, you force others to confront their own position. Words allow people to orient themselves. Silence removes that orientation. Without reference, they drift. This drift is destabilizing. It creates imbalance. It provokes self-exposure. People speak more when you speak less. They justify. They fill gaps. They reveal motives. Silence is not passive. It is an active refusal to stabilize the emotional field for others. You were trained to resolve discomfort. Authority allows discomfort to expand. The one who remains unmoved becomes the axis around which others rotate. When you withdraw reaction, you remove the mirror. Others are left staring at themselves. This is why silence feels threatening. It does not attack. It reflects nothing. In absence of your response, narratives multiply. Some will assume disapproval. Some will assume indifference. Some will assume superiority. None of these weaken you, because the one who does not correct perception controls it. Silence creates asymmetry. Asymmetry creates hierarchy. You mistake silence for avoidance because you were taught that engagement equals strength. Engagement is exposure. Exposure is vulnerability. The quiet figure in the room dictates tempo. Conversations slow around them. Statements are weighed more carefully. Jokes soften. Aggression diffuses. Not because of fear, but because of uncertainty. Predators test for movement. Prey reacts. Stillness reverses the roles. Silence denies others feedback. Without feedback, they cannot calibrate dominance. They cannot tell if they succeeded. They cannot tell if they failed. This ambiguity forces overextension. Overextension reveals position. You do not need to intimidate. You only need to remain unreadable. Silence is not withdrawal from power. It is consolidation of it. It gathers force the longer it holds. When you speak less, your words gain mass. When you react less, your presence gains gravity. Others adjust around what they cannot penetrate. This is not cruelty. It is structure. The system respects what it cannot easily access. Silence is access control, and once established, it reshapes the entire field without a single declaration. Distance is not absence. Distance is elevation. When you withdraw emotionally, socially, or psychologically, the system reinterprets your value. Scarcity recalibrates attention. What is always available is treated as infrastructure. What withdraws becomes a point of reference. You were taught that closeness builds bonds. In hierarchies, closeness collapses leverage. Availability signals surplus. Surplus is priced low. Strategic withdrawal is not retreat. It is refusal to be consumed. The moment you step back, others step forward. They notice the gap. They feel the loss of access. They begin to measure what you provided without realizing it. This recalculation happens silently. It does not require confrontation. Emotional unavailability is read as selectivity. Selectivity implies options. Options imply power. You believed presence proved loyalty. In reality, presence without scarcity proves disposability. The system respects what it must reach for, not what waits. Distance introduces cost. Cost introduces respect. When you remove yourself from constant engagement, you deny others emotional certainty. Certainty breeds carelessness. Uncertainty sharpens attention. This is why elevation always feels like abandonment to those below. They relied on your availability to stabilize their own position. Your withdrawal forces them to confront the imbalance. You are not punishing. You are reallocating. Strategic distance also purifies perception. Without your constant input, others reveal their true posture. Some chase, some resent, some disappear. Each response classifies them accurately. Withdrawal is filtration. Those who matter will adjust upward. Those who do not will accuse downward. Neither reaction requires correction. Power does not negotiate its distance. It establishes it. You do not announce boundaries. You enforce them through absence. You do not demand value. You let scarcity create it. This distance changes how words land. When you finally speak, it interrupts. It matters. It resets alignment. You are no longer reacting inside the system. You are above it. Elevation does not seek validation. It produces gravity, and gravity does not explain itself. Perception is not shaped by truth. It is shaped by composure. The calm figure defines the narrative without speaking. Others supply the story. They interpret restraint as confidence. They interpret stillness as control. They interpret emotional neutrality as superiority. You do not need to correct misunderstandings. Correction lowers you into the frame of those who speculate. Silence allows perception to crystallize without your involvement. Narrative control is not achieved through explanation. Explanation invites debate. Debate implies equality. Equality dissolves authority. When you remain composed, the system assumes intent. Intent is attributed upward. People believe you see more than you reveal. They assume calculation. They assign depth. This is not manipulation. It is automatic pattern recognition. Humans are trained to defer to what appears settled. Agitation creates noise. Noise invites intrusion. Calm creates distance. Distance invites projection. You become the still surface onto which others project their assumptions. Some will imagine approval. Some will imagine threat. Some will imagine indifference. Each projection reveals their position relative to you. You do not correct them. The one who explains gives away authorship. The one who remains unmoved lets the narrative form around them. This narrative will not always be accurate. Accuracy is irrelevant. Influence is what matters. Power is assumed, not proven. Your restraint forces others to narrate themselves into proximity or exile. They decide how close they stand. You simply remain where you are. This composure disrupts expectation. People anticipate reaction. When none arrives, they hesitate. Hesitation shifts control. The calm individual does not chase alignment. Alignment forms around them. Perception hardens quickly. Once established, it resists contradiction. The image of authority survives errors. The image of need collapses under scrutiny. You stop trying to be understood. You allow yourself to be interpreted. Interpretation creates hierarchy. Understanding creates parity. You are no longer managing impressions. You are allowing them to form. And once formed, they work in your favor without effort. This is how narrative bends to stillness. Every interaction is a board. Every pause is a move. You were trained to respond, to engage, to correct, to advance visibly. In strategic systems, movement is exposure. The one who moves first reveals intent. The one who remains still forces others to declare themselves. Social space is not cooperative. It is positional. Each word advances a piece. Each reaction commits you to a line you did not choose. Non-movement creates pressure. Pressure forces mistakes. When you refuse to react, others compensate. They speak too much. They escalate tone. They attempt dominance theatrically. Each attempt exposes their rank. You do not counter. You wait. Waiting is not indecision. It is constraint. It limits the opponent's options while preserving your own. The longer you hold, the more they overextend. You were taught that engagement proves confidence. Confidence does not prove itself. It lets others fail around it. In social chess, the loudest player is rarely winning. They are signaling urgency. Urgency reveals risk. Risk lowers perceived authority. The quiet position is misread as passive by those who need motion to feel powerful. They advance. They commit. They trap themselves. Your stillness becomes the board's center. Moves are made in reference to you. Reactions orbit you. You become the measure. This is why indifference unsettles aggressive personalities. They rely on friction to define themselves. Without resistance, their force collapses inward. You do not block. You do not attack. You deny relevance. Denial is the strongest counter. It removes the game from those who cannot control themselves within it. When you move, it is late. It is minimal. It is irreversible. Others feel it because they have already revealed too much. You never needed to dominate. You only needed to stop participating on their terms. The board rearranges itself around immobility, and those who cannot tolerate waiting will always lose. Indifference is not numbness. It is sovereignty. Suppression requires effort. Transcendence requires none. Suppression is tension held inside the body. Indifference is altitude where tension cannot reach. You were told to care appropriately, to respond proportionally, to remain emotionally available to preserve connection. This training anchored you to the reactions of others. Indifference cuts the anchor. When you are indifferent, provocation fails. Praise dissolves. Criticism passes through without friction. You are no longer calibrated to external stimulus. You are self-referenced. This state is misunderstood by those who live inside reactivity. They call it cold. They call it detached. They call it arrogance. These labels are defensive. Indifference is not dismissal. It is prioritization. You do not suppress feeling. You deprive it of authority. Emotions may arise. They do not govern movement. They do not dictate speech. They do not alter posture. This is the discipline. Most people mistake emotional control for emotional denial. Denial creates fracture. Indifference creates coherence. Nothing is resisted. Nothing is indulged. Everything passes. This makes you unreadable. Unreadability disrupts leverage. Others cannot predict how to move you because nothing moves you. They escalate. You remain level. They attempt intimacy. You remain neutral. They attempt conflict. You remain still. Each attempt confirms your position above the exchange. Indifference is expensive. It costs identity. It costs belonging. It costs the comfort of mutual emotional reinforcement. Most cannot afford it. That is why it signals power. When you no longer need reaction, reaction loses its value. When you no longer seek response, response loses its influence. You are not disengaged. You are ungoverned. This is not cruelty. It is internal order, and internal order cannot be negotiated. At a certain altitude, identity hardens. You are no longer defined by participation. You are defined by absence, by the spaces you do not enter, by the reactions you do not give, by the explanations you never offer. This identity is not adopted, it is recognized. Most people live inside reflex. They answer before they decide. They explain before they assess. They reveal before they are asked. Their identity is porous, easily accessed, easily influenced. Yours is sealed. The untouchable identity is not loud. It does not announce standards. It does not defend itself. Defense implies threat. Threat implies vulnerability. You do not protect your position. You inhabit it. Others sense this immediately. They feel the boundary without seeing it. They lower their voice. They choose words more carefully. They hesitate before assuming familiarity. Not because you demanded respect, but because nothing in you invites trespass. This identity is rare because it requires loss. You lose the need to be understood. You lose the comfort of emotional reciprocity. You lose the illusion that sincerity will be rewarded. In return, you gain structural immunity. Praise no longer elevates you. Criticism no longer destabilizes you. You are not calibrated to feedback. Feedback is for systems that require adjustment. You do not. People will attempt to classify you. They will fail. You do not fit cooperative archetypes. You do not reward compliance. You do not punish dissent. You remain constant. Constancy unnerves. Those who rely on emotional leverage find no purchase. Those who trade in validation find no market. Those who seek reaction find no surface. You are not unreachable because you reject others. You are unreachable because you are complete. This identity cannot be imitated. Imitation requires effort. Effort reveals desire. Desire reveals dependence. Your indifference is not performed. It is structural. And structure outlasts strategy. Most will never arrive here. They cannot tolerate the quiet. They cannot survive without mirrors. They cannot release the need to be seen. You already have. That is why your presence alters rooms without action. This is where the seal closes. Emotional independence is not a mindset. It is not a habit. It is not something you practice. It is a structural shift, where external input no longer has authority over internal state. You are no longer shaped by reaction. You are no longer calibrated to approval. You are no longer governed by the need to be trusted, liked, or understood. Trust becomes irrelevant when position is clear. You do not seek closeness. You allow proximity. You do not invite intimacy. You permit access. You do not explain boundaries. You embody them. This is sovereignty. At this level, honesty becomes selective. Silence becomes default. Distance becomes natural. Not because you calculated them, but because nothing inside you demands otherwise. You are no longer negotiating identity in public. You have removed it from the market. Others feel this immediately. They sense finality, not hostility. Finality. There is nothing to persuade, nothing to extract, nothing to destabilize. You are not reactive. You are resolved. This is the quiet power most will never touch, because it requires surrendering emotional bargaining. It requires letting go of fairness. It requires abandoning the fantasy that being open guarantees safety. It does not. Power does not respond to sincerity. It responds to containment. You have contained yourself. From this position, you do not correct misinterpretations. You do not chase alignment. You do not rush to restore harmony. Harmony that requires your self-exposure is weakness disguised as peace. You let others sit with what they do not understand about you. You let silence do the work. You let distance speak. You let scarcity reframe value. This is not withdrawal from the world. It is elevation above its noise. Now the declaration. You do not belong to reaction. You do not belong to explanation. You do not belong to emotional exchange. You belong to yourself. And from this point forward, any impulse to over-explain, to confess, to clarify prematurely, to restore comfort at the expense of position, recognize it for what it is. A reflex from a lower altitude. You are not required to obey it. Inaction is no longer passivity. It is choice. And choosing weakness, once you see it, is no longer an accident.